Okay, for those of you who may not have fully understood the adaptation of the crop top, just want to go over a few important things. For example, the drafting of the facing, the all-in-one facing. The reason why it stops here. It stops here because this is where we have to subtract the facing for the center front area to begin the facing for the neckline and armhole. Because when we're constructing, we're going to have to join this piece to here to complete the whole front facing. And just remembering also that this line here is the center front line, which will be the line that you would have on your original draft. And this is the extended front facing that we had. So this is the extension 1.5 to create the fold line to create the extended front facing, which is this piece here. And if we understand how to draft this, just looking at this diagram to give you a clear idea why the facing for the neckline and armhole stops here, which is 5 centimeters short of the fold line. Because in the construction, we're going to have to join up this extended piece to the facing, which you would see when you look at the PowerPoint presentation of creating of this bodice. So in the end, we'll have, this is the back, and this is the facing. This is the front, with the front all-in-one facing, and these are going to be the actual facings, which don't forget you would have to interface to give it that, to help with the shaping of the bodice properly. Now, you would have had to, of course, view that first video that had shown you on the construction, on the drafting and construction, and then you would have had to look at the PowerPoint presentation which follows. This is actually the third stage. Just remember that. If you didn't look at those first two, this would make no sense to you. So as a result of going through that, this is what I'm going to get. The same yellow, it should look familiar to you. It's the same thing I've been using, because when we have completed the construction, or I should say complete, we should have reached a particular point where we'd have had to apply the facing. Okay, this is it here. Right. The facing to the crop top. This is what we would find happening. That we would have to join the front facing to the extended piece like this in the front. And after we join it, also remember, according to the information given on the PowerPoint, you don't stitch from the edge around the neckline right up out. You stop short. You stop on the seam line for the shoulder. And remember, I told you also, it's got to be exact. The width of the shoulder of the crop top neckline as well as the shoulder supposed to be the same width for the facing as well as the bodice. So that when we join, you wouldn't have one piece longer. If you have one piece longer, you'll find you have a little bit of problem. So just take your time in doing your drafting as well as your construction. So you notice I stopped right at this point, I backstitch. I stop right at this point here as well, and I backstitch. In the end, this part up here, that is going to be the seam allowance of the shoulder as well as the facing area. And of course, you notice I had interfaced the facing as was requested by the PowerPoint presentation. And if you join properly, you should find at the seam of the underarm, you'll notice the seams cross perfectly well. Make sure and pin it in place properly so it would have no problem. You'll also notice the neatening of the edges. You could have used a serge if you had one. You could have used a machine zigzag. But this method I used was a simple turnover and stitch, which is called an edge stitch of the facing, enclosing the edge of the interfacing. And even before you turn everything over to the right side, what you should need to do is trim. This is you might have excess fabric on the inside of the seam allowances here. This is something we're supposed to know. So trim excess seam allowances. So this has really been trimmed. And if the fabric was heavy, you could have done some grading. That means you trim one side a little lower to allow for a more flatter finish when you turn. And at the corner here, if you look at it carefully, you will notice that there is a triangular trimming or clipping of that edge before you turn. And more than that, you have clipping into the curved areas. So this is the neckline. Of course, the neckline have a curve. Before you turn, you better clip it. Clip it right down into as close as possible to this. See here? Close as possible to the seam line. Of course, not cutting the seam line, because if you cut the seam line, you're going to make a hole in the process. So you clip about 4 or 5 right around. You do it wherever there's a curve. You trim, you clip, and then you have to understitch. You know what understitching is? Okay, this is what happens when you understitch. It's difficult to keep this steady, but I'll just try. Are you seeing that row of stitching close to the edge? That is understitching. It's where you hold all the seam allowances together. Make sure you press it flat. But you're not going to be stitching onto the right side of the garment when it's finished. It's just holding the seam allowances of the facing, interfacing, and if you look on this side, you will see how it's supposed to look. On the other side, this is the right side. If I turn it, you will see how it's supposed to look. And it's on this side, you'll be actually doing the understitching. So that when you're sewing it, when you're actually sewing, this information is also provided on the PowerPoint. It's just a further explanation. When you're actually stitching, it may be easier to stitch from this side, but some people may find it easier to stitch on this side. Actually, it doesn't matter where you stitch, as long as you hold it down and allow no little folds to creep up on the seam line there, and you do your stitching. In the end of the stitching, this understitching process is supposed to prevent the facing from rolling over to the right side in actual wear. Don't worry about this. This is because I had to remove this stitching to be able to show it carefully. Don't worry about that, though this shouldn't be seen on your own garment. If it happens, you just have to remove it. So when you do your understitching, as far as possible, you may not be able to go right on the top, but you can do it as much as possible. Let me try to focus it better so you can get a clear idea of what it's supposed to look like. It's difficult to focus. I hope you can see that. It goes right around to the other side as far as possible, as where you can stitch. And you stop if you cannot go anymore. So in the end, after you do all of that, then you can turn it over. Pull it through like this. Even here, if you've done all your trimming and clipping, it shouldn't be difficult and to turn it over to get a look like this. Both sides, right around the neckline. I'm going to show you in one side at this point. In the end, you will have 4 shoulder areas exposed. As you can see, it's difficult to show it, and I don't want to waste time Just trying to go around because time is going. I only have 15 minutes. So when it's done, and you bring them all through, you'll have 4 looking like this. And then this is the front. Which you will join to the back on one side. To do that, as you would have read again on the PowerPoint, you realize now you have these open pieces. And then you will look at it, you hold the 2 inner pieces together, taking your time along the shoulder seam, join from one end to the other, tack it first carefully, and then you machine stitch right across from this point to the other. And when you finish stitching, you see this inside piece, you stitch first, you trim it, and then you fold it over to be able to complete. This is the right side. That's the one you're going to be stitching. And the other side, which is the wrong side, you fold over the piece that is left over and hem it along this seam of the shoulder to complete it. So in the end, when you finish this area, it's supposed to look like this. Well enclosed properly. That is one method, and it's the easiest method I think that you could use. However, after you finish with that, you still have the front to deal with. The front opening, which I will complete to show you how it's supposed to look. But at this point, you put in the button and buttonhole. Again, all this is what I would have been doing. I just removed it to explain what is to be done. Now, part of this garment is the lower edge. To finish the lower edge, you will have a seam allowance, a seam line here, or I should say a hem line. To finish this hemline, this is the fold in the front. I just want to show you a photo of how you're supposed to do it on something else. So just look at this. This is the original. Let me just show you what you can use. So this is the lower edge of what you can do. This is the extended front facing. You fold it back along the fold line, across, and you want to machine stitch along the hemline, and this will be the hem allowance. You neaten the edge, or you could do a machine zigzag. You trim the edge of the facing according to what you see here, and you take a larger bit of triangle from the hemline. This is all done again to reduce any kind of bulk and to make it easy to turn over, so that when you turn this area, this part is enclosed like this. You notice how nice and neat it looks now. It's flat because all the excess fabric has been removed. And then this goes right around. You fold on the hemline, and then you can do the required hemming stitch. Probably will pin it in place, tack, and you could probably do a herringbone stitch. You should know what a herringbone stitch look like, starting from here, right across to the other side, and then again you can just hem here, a regular visible hemming from this point to this point to finish that whole hemline. I hope that is easy for you to understand. The next video I'm going to be doing is to show you how you're going to do the placement of button and buttonhole along the front of your crop top. I might be able to do it by just diagrams, which is probably be easier. But if you have any questions, you can send a question, whatever method you choose. Thank you very much.